And today, of course, we have a number of expert speakers here. We have Stuart from Teagasc and Cronin, who listen to the farmer, what he's doing from a breeding point of view, and how he's getting the best out of his genetics, and how he's getting the best out of the solids from every cow. Then we have Dennis Howard on Semen, and Seamus Lord, and we'll go through a number of questions with him. And then we have Daly and Alan Dillon from Teagasc, Chris from ICBF, and they'll go through CBV and DairyBeef index and how that understood. And then we'll Stuart to wrap it up, and then we'll do the live cattle demonstration as well. So look, without further ado, I'll hand you over to Stuart Childs, who will take on the role of moderator today. Okay?
Thanks, Billy. So welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today, and we hope you get some benefit from the day. Before I start, because I won't be speaking at the end, I just want to sincerely thank Pat for stepping up when I asked him to do this. I'd say if I rang him again now, I won't get answered the next time. So, and also I would like to thank John O'Callaghan, who has provided the cattle that Chris will be talking about in a while, and Conleyhan, who has brought in the 2 cows for us to demonstrate the maintenance sub-index today as well. Okay, so we very, very much appreciate the help of the 3 guys in actually running the event, because obviously it wouldn't happen without them. Okay. So today we decided that we wanted to talk about realising the genetic potential of your herd. So the AI companies are trying to give you the best genetics as possible, and then I suppose it's up to you to actually deliver on them. Okay, so we just have a few slides here. Billy's giving you the running order. I'm just going to give you a couple of slides here before we go talking about 2-pack directly. First, we're just going to give you a couple of pointers. So genetics creates the potential, and what we're going to kind of elaborate a little bit with Pat in a minute is that the management is what's actually realising that potential. So if you have the genetics and you put the management piece with it, you will get really, really good performance, and we'll see Pat's performance in a minute. And I suppose just on a national scale, we can show that from a Dairygold perspective, and this is true of a national scale as well, these are figures that I got from Kevin Downing in ICBF. We can see, and you might find it hard, I might have to go here. So this is the average for Dairygold here, €186 for EBI, which covers 2,307 herds, delivering 5,173 litres at 435 butter fat and 358 protein, which is giving a total kilos of solids of 423, okay? Cell count of 189, milk price 51.1, 6-week calving rate 72%, calving interval 382 days, okay? I suppose some other key figures there, I suppose, would be that the AI bred replacements on average for the Dairygold area is only 63%, so that's a disappointing figure, I would say, as a whole. And then the replacement rate is 19.8%, okay? So what are the top 20% looking like? I'm not going to go through all the numbers, and there are cohort herds with no EBI there as well. So the top 20%, and Pat is one of them, 241 euro EBI, 146 cows on average, we'll say. 98% of herds in the top 20% are milk recording, 100% of the herds that are in the top 20% are in herd plus, okay? They're delivering 5,653 litres versus the average of 5,173, so just close on 500 litres of a difference. There is a theory out there that EBI has bred milk out of cows. These numbers would push back against that theory, okay? So 5,653 litres on average from the 433 herds. Delivering 478 kilos of solids, so that's 55 kilos more than the average for Dairygold. Cell count lower at 144. There's a premium associated with the better butter fat and protein, giving a 2.1 cent a litre margin over and above the average price. And a lot of the extra milk is actually driven by an 82% 6-week calving rate and a 371-day calving interval. So basically we're calving faster, so we're producing longer lactations and producing more milk as a result, okay? 93% of the replacements being bred are being born into the top 20% of herds are AI bred, and that's probably a key point in terms of delivering our 369 and our 454, okay? Because no matter what way we look at it, stock bulls are always going to be 2 to 3 years behind in terms of genetic capacity, okay? So the long and the short of it is, in terms of if you want to get into the top 20%, you need to be milk recording, and you need to be bringing lots of AI bred heifers and high quality AI bred heifers into the mix, okay? And then I suppose the other thing people maybe aren't as concerned about, but it's important that it's happening in the background, is that the top 20% of herds are producing that milk at 0.9 of a kg of CO2 per kg of fat and protein corrected milk versus practically 1 here for the average. So more carbon efficient as well, which, look, we don't really know what way that's going to go. Well, I don't actually know what way it's going to go into the future in terms of the industry, but there is a possibility that in the future there may be a reward for that. So we need to be breeding for cows that are going to be more efficient in terms of carbon footprint and so forth, okay? So we're going to talk about Pat now. So Pat is a very high performing herd, and what I have on the screen here is Pat's EBI report. It's very important to point out that if you look up here, it says the 20th of April 2024, okay? There's a reason that I have used the 2024 EBI report here. It's because I'm going to show you Pat's performance for 2024 in terms of his crop performance report. So that's reflecting the genetics that were in the herd last year, okay? So you can see that the herd had an EBI of 246 on the 20th of April 2024. So I just picked that date as being kind of just before we start breeding. We're more or less going to be settled down in terms of the numbers that we have on the farm and so forth. So it's going to represent the herd, it's going to be there. And you can see the young stock then that were coming through. So the calves that were born last year and the heifers that were going to be AI then as well last year are also shown on it. And you can see the progression through the herd. So 246, first lactations at 255, our young stock then coming through, our calves higher than our heifers at 269. So generally good progression, and sometimes, I suppose, and you'll talk about it maybe in a minute, Pat, as well, sometimes you can get maybe little changes that you're not happy with yourself, but look, it's just a factor of maybe a way a bull goes or whatever, okay? So I suppose that's fine and well looking at these figures. I think where we want to really focus on in terms of realising that potential is up over here where you can see the 0.2 and the 0.15, okay? So that's the predicted transmitting ability for fat and protein percentages, and also very important figures there are to the left of it, the 10.6 kilos of fat and the 8.1 kilos of protein. If we look at the same box further down for the young stock here, so we can see that the heifers that would have calved down this year were 0.2 for protein percentage down here versus 0.15 for the herd average, and 0.13 for fat versus 0.2. And we also have increases in both our fat and protein kilos. The other number that I want to highlight to people is minus 18 up here. So people are very bothered about minus figures when it comes to milk. They think that this is breeding milk out of cows, okay? Pat delivered 6,500 or plus litres last year. So he's actually in the high band with a minus milk figure, okay? So it comes back to what I said about the Dairygold table a minute ago. Calving cows compactly and early to get long lactations is actually a more key driver of milk production than having positive milk sub-index on your EBI report, okay? So what does this translate into in terms of performance, okay? So work done a number of years ago by a colleague of ours in Teagasc, George Ramsbottom, which I'm sure most people will be familiar with George or heard of George. So George did a bit of work that looked at a lot of herds and how they were performing and their EBIs and so forth, and he basically was able to put the two together to come up with a kind of a calculation or a relationship that will kind of give us a rough guide. Now, it's not 100% accurate, it's a 60-65% relationship effectively that we can say that if your PTA for fat or protein is X or Y, you should be able to deliver Z and T basically, kind of that scenario, okay? So Pat's situation is PTA that we've taken from here, 0.2%. There's the multiplier that's used for it is 3.94, which gives it 0.79. And we add it to the base protein, or the base fat figure, and it gives us a potential. So on the basis of that 0.2, Pat has the capacity to do 4.72% fat in what he sells to Dairygold, okay? The same is true for the protein. There's another equation. So we take our 0.15 from here, use the multiplier of 3.83, add it to the base of 3.36, and the genetic potential for protein in Pat's herd last year was 3.93, okay? So that's the potential of the herd, 393 protein and 472 fat. The future potential, I suppose, looking at the young stock, so the 2024 calves that were born last year, doing the same sum, applying the same principle, they have the potential when they'll come in to do 416 protein and 5.23 fat, okay? So really good performance in terms of good progression in the herd as well. And then the challenge is for Pat actually to realise that potential effectively. So we'll come to that in a second. So this is a snippet of Pat's co-op performance report for 2024. So you all get these sent out to you or available to you through either her plus or maybe Dairygold might send it out to you as well. So you can see 5-star performance and you can see the star rating out of 100. So within Dairygold, Pat is effectively the lowest mark you have. Pat is actually your factor at 94%. So performing in the top 10% effectively for everything. The two red numbers over here are just bringing you back to the previous slide. So Pat had the genetic capacity to produce 4.72 fat and 3.93 protein, and he delivered 469 fat and 3.88 protein, okay? So that is very good, especially with the protein point of view. You will all be familiar with how tricky a month of April and May we had last year, and even in a lot of the summer. So when we lose grass growth in the summertime like that, it tends to hamper protein production, as you will be all familiar with. And Billy and the lads inside in Mitchellstown will be very familiar with it because they see it on the graphs that protein dips because of the diet changing. And as a result, we would have fallen short of our potential in 2024 and 2023. So to actually be within 0.05 of the potential was actually excellent performance, okay? I think the thing that's worthy of pointing out is, because of these figures here, Pat has 55.6 centilitre of a milk price versus the 51.1 that we were talking about in terms of the average. So 4.5 centilitre of a premium over the average, okay? So that accumulates, as I said, over the 6,500 litres, that adds up to a nice bit of money. And then I suppose the other thing, I suppose just in terms of the management piece of it, excellent self-count at 66 as well. So this is coming back into the fertility piece. Again, we have 5 stars the whole way down here. So 3-6 day calving interval, so effectively calving in 12 months all the time. 88% 6-week calving rate. Not without its challenges, obviously, in terms of actually doing it, but it is a key driver of milk produced on the farm as well. We know exactly what we have in terms of sire and calving survey, and that should be a given. People should have 100% for that. There should be no reason that we can't record calving E's and sires in this scenario here. And 100% then of the replacements are AI bred. And that's a very, very important piece, as we pointed out in the initial slide. And then I suppose there's a couple of things have to happen on farms to realise that potential, and one of these is actually calving the heifers in that 22 to 26 month window, and the heifers have to be right as well, okay? So talking to one of my colleagues up the country yesterday evening, and Dennis was on the call as well, John McCabe, who used to work in the area down here, he has seen in the area that he's in now that there's a significant issue with heifers in terms of their performance, and that they're not up to scratch effectively. So Dennis will probably pick up on it there in a minute in terms of the sex semen. The performance of sex semen is actually driven by those animals being at target weights, being in good order for insemination, but it also carries through to this level here. So if Pat slips up in terms of his replacement rearing piece, he's not going to get the potential out of the herd because they're light coming into the parlour, they're trying to grow too much, they're not able to put it into the tank, and as a result he'll fall short. So there's a lot of pieces of the jigsaw have to fall into place, okay? And then I suppose this just highlights the EBI of the herd currently is 251, and then that says 2025 there, but it will be the 2024 inseminations are €325. So we'll pick up on these pieces with Pat now in terms of how they ring true on the farm. So Pat, I suppose your herd is really delivering. The herd is in the top 5% in the country for EBI, or in the top 10% there for Dairygold for milk production and so forth. Just tell us, how have you come to be in that position? Or because it's a good number of years breeding on the farm to put you there?
Yeah, look, I don't know. I suppose it's kind of like slowly catch a monkey. It's in the sense that we're at it. You can see the grey hair in me. That you can see we're at it long enough. I'm at it over 30 years, and it's always AI, and it's always trying to pick the best bull based on the advice available at the time. I suppose I was looking up to when I started way back. We had a good herd. My father had always, as far back as I can remember, milk garden always used AI, so that was a great start. And look, we've been looking up as well. Like we haven't had any major disease issues or anything like that. Or the herd has expanded, but it hasn't expanded massively. So we've never been short of replacements. We've always had enough replacements. We've always been like everything's in the herd is homebred. Everything's bred right. So with 30 years, I don't think we've bought any with 30 years. So look, just pick the better cows, try and pick the best bulls, and then, like I said, it's just genetic gain slowly, and I suppose that's over there.
Okay, so just in terms of getting to that point, so Pat, like, do you follow EBI completely, or what way do you actually select the bulls that you're going to use now? And you've even done a little bit of thinking about this year's bull choices as well already.
Yeah, I suppose the EBI would change a lot. Like going back before that, we would all, like all of us would have done various. Like you think that there's no, like when Stuart rang me there a couple of weeks ago, I said, Jesus, like you'll find something better because I know nothing about breeding, I look at it for 6 weeks or 4 weeks in a year, pick a few bulls, and by the time they're calving down next year, I won't even know what bulls are calving down. They'll be all numbers that mean nothing to me. So look, I suppose like going way back, we would have started with like a lot of other people looking at American and Dutch, genetics, and we thought we were doing mighty, and then we caused lots of problems for ourselves, and we would have gone on to black and whites from New Zealand, we would have done some crossbreeding, we'd have done daughter-proven bulls, we're doing genomic bulls now. So, but like always trying to pick the best we could. I suppose and we would have been adding, because of the EBI, we can add a little bit more to our thinking now, but in the start it was volume, and then it was volume and protein, especially in the quota era when we were told we didn't really want the fat because it was causing other issues. So there was bulls being advertised that were, a good fat to protein ratio, you remember, and that causes a little bit of hole for all of us in terms of our fat, I think, at that stage. But anyway, and so going forward to know, I think when I look at in the bulls that I've always looked at protein percentage. Would be more conscious in recent years with the protein kgs. Obviously the fat percentage and the fat kgs, that'd be the first thing. Look at the fertility figure, look at the maintenance figure, and in the last couple of years look at the health figure, and they're the criteria you use. I'll always be following the Teagasc advice. We have a great group, and when I can go back to the Stuart rang a couple of weeks ago, there's several guys in our discussion group that know far more and are better qualified to talk about breeding than I am. But at least that allows us to have a good debate every year in terms of what bulls we pick. And I take that information with me, I take our Teagasc advice with me, I bother Declan Keating or someone in Munster and take that information with me, and I'd just, like I said, put together a team of bulls based on what I think is the right direction, and then park it, and next year start off and do the same thing. So that's simple.
So, I suppose back just to, as we said, the title of the event today is Realising the Potential of Your Herd. I've shown on the slides there that we said that there's management required to deliver on that potential. Will you outline to us how you actually manage the herd to actually achieve what you've achieved there? And that's not just 2024, there's years of information there that if you go back, you can see that you always do that kind of level of performance. We're saying your performance is rising over the last number of years as the genetic potential has increased as well. So how do you actually knock that level of performance out of the cows?
I suppose, I don't know, our system is very simple. We don't have a diet feeder, we don't have maize, we don't have anything like that. All we have is grass, silage and meal. And so we just work away as best we can, try and get the cows out as early, get the cows compact calving, get them out as early as we can, as often as we can, and just stay with it. It's tough going. Last spring was dreadful, some of this February was terrible as well, a lot of work, but that's, I suppose we backed ourselves in the corner in a way, and we have nothing else to fall back in, so it forced our hand, so we stay after it, and like I said, just try and get him out, and and keep getting as much grass as we can into them. Try and keep the grass right, obviously, during the rest of the summer, and that's it. That's the show.
You make it sound very simple.
It's not like, you know, like our scale isn't huge. We're 80 cows. You know, we had this discussion even in our own discussion group. You know, in terms of, you know, it's not easy. It's hugely time consuming leaving cows out, especially when the weather is difficult. And some days you just wonder, like, would you have been better off not leaving out at all? You know, damage done, lots of time. You know, like in the spring, I find, like I'm on my own. I find the spring look, farmers are well used to work, so work is not the thing. It's time. It's just time is the most scarce resource is there. And like if you spend an hour or two, you know, looking for a place for cows, putting up a back fence, putting up a front fence, it's you know, and then they go out and maybe they do damage, and you're wondering, geez, like, would have been better off. So like, maybe at our scale we can, is it sustainable at a bigger scale with more legs and more, you know, more damage? I don't know, but look, that's what we do, it works for us for now. It's weather dependent. We try and keep some good bales for the spring to supplement when we're in trouble, and that's our only get out of jail card, really. So after that, it's just stick with it.
Okay. So just in terms of the actual management piece then, Pat, how important is it in your mind in terms of actually delivering the performance? Like we say, there are things that you're doing that you probably think are just maybe they're second nature to you know at this stage, but like you said there, the quality silage. Like if you didn't have the quality silage, what would you expect in terms of will you be able to deliver the way you've been delivering there? Say how do you manage in terms of the autumn, that kind of thing as well? And like what level of meal are you like would say adjusting in terms of meal or reacting in terms of conditions and so forth? Just maybe briefly outline that.
I could say at every point during the year, spring or autumn, the most important thing is we never let the cows hungry, in fairness. Like we, you know, either on the side of, like we don't have strip wire as much, we'd always put enough in front of the cows. If, you know, whatever I thought they should get, they'll probably get more, you know, at all the times. I know in wet weather when you're trying to grade out places, you kind of play around with it a bit, but like, and it's the same with me, like, we feed probably somewhere shy of a tonne normally. We probably fed, I'd say, a tonne and a quarter, damn close to last year because of we were feeding a lot longer in the spring. We were short grass in the summer. We elected to stay with the meal during the summer in order to catch up with some silage because we were short of silage. So I'd say we ended up with a tonne and a quarter. But like basically what I'm saying is that be it spring or be it autumn, they always are. They're not standing in gaps. They always have enough to eat, and I have no problem giving them extra meal if they need it. And I just adjust according to, you know, look, I have no grass covered in this year because of time constraints, but like during the summer we're regular floor grass walks, we do 30 or 40 in the year, we'd stay on top of the grass, like I said, not put back the meal until we think we can afford to, and just look after them and not have them hungry. That's the key.
Okay, so just moving on to in terms of the numbers of heifers that you want then, with how many do you want to land on the ground, and will you use sixth and conventional, or what's the plan? We'll say you used a bit of both last year.
Yeah, I'd use a bit of both this year. I'd probably use 50-50. No, we don't get back to the old simple system for the simple farmer. We don't have collars or anything like that. So that limits, I think, how much sexed you can go with. So look, I'd probably somewhere, my thinking is maybe 50-50 this year, sexed and conventional, because you'll have cows that you won't be sure about what you're going to do maybe going forward. You'll have cows that timing-wise they won't be in the window for giving them sex, so they get and if they're ones I feel they're right for breeding, they'll get a conventional straw. We'll have one or two that will be doubting whether they're really going to the area, or cows that may be an issue in the spring. So that's where the conventional come in. We'll be using sexed on anyone that we deem right. Replacement rate, we'll always bred to have enough and a little bit with it. You know, we don't have a bull, we don't have a beef bull or dairy or Frisian bull, so like we can choose to stop when we stop. Like, but look, 80 cows, 16, 18 heifers is plenty for us. This year now we're 26 or 27 of them on the ground. We'll move on to a few extra ones, and we'll keep just the replacements.
Just in terms of the actual breeding season then, Pat, I would say, what kind of length do you generally do?
I'd say it's just shy of 10 weeks last year.
You're nearly finished calving at the moment.
Yeah, there's
a handful left.
Three left, and all hopefully to calve before Mart is over. There was one girl going to April, thankfully she jumped the gun and she's at calving, so there's There's 3 more due to calf next couple of days, and that's it.
Okay, so that's important probably in terms of actually repeating the 6-week calving rate as well, that everything is calved well ahead of breeding as well.
Yeah, I see it all the time. I've always said, like, some fellas will say, whatever, I'm not. Like, it's very difficult to get compact, but once you're there, it makes it easier going forward, because you look, and you'll probably be talking later on about intervening with cows and everything. I don't do much intervention. Like, time is, for me, is the key. Like, that's the one that gets them over the line more than anything else, I think, more than any other intervention.
Okay, so just on the beef, you mentioned it there a second ago, and I suppose I'll put it to you this way. So for people that are listening to the Dairy Age podcast that week, myself and James Dunn are doing, I had Sean Coughlin on it yesterday. He was just saying that he's concerned about the beef element is that there's potentially the likes of your herd putting in beef straws into very hygienic married cows. He would actually love to see a scenario where there was the potential to move replacements from Cronin's herd and other high-performing herds down to the lower-performing herds that were on the table there, maybe across the Dairygold catchment, across all the country, and that the gain for the Irish dairy industry as a whole would be phenomenal if we could do that. What's your thinking in that, in terms of, would you breed more heifers, or like we talked about the simple system there the whole time, it's like, is it just easier to do what you normally do and let everybody else worry about themselves as such to a certain extent?
Yeah, well, that's what we would have done. I suppose, like, I don't know what things are like this year in terms of stock. Like last year was difficult, I think, for some people with replacement heifers. Like, you know, we don't have any elaborate housing for calves, and they're nipple bucket fed, you know. So, like, it's nice to come in here with Jerry Sullivan with a load of beef calves that are gone, you know, rods then holding on, you know, and maybe trying to find a market or, you know, that kind of thing. So we've always bred, like I said, enough for ourselves and a few spare just in case kind of thing, but we've never gone any more than that. No, obviously within the herd, there are some cows I wouldn't breed off anyway, no matter, you know, the herd is fairly settled now and well established and all that, but within that there are cows you wouldn't breed off for production reasons, for even temperament reasons. There's a few of them I don't, and so like you'll always have a few beef calves, but you know, like, geez, would I breed more? Not unless somebody was after, you know, signing some sort of contract or doing something beforehand, because you know, it only complicates my system even more. Like, I would breed them if I knew the calves were moving off at 3 weeks of age, but I'm not, you know, I don't want to breed them to be looking at them there next summer, or we're tight on land and we're tight on labour, and do we need another I suppose another job of work? No, we don't. So that's my thinking.
Okay, very good. So you're open to offers so afterwards. Okay, so just I suppose last 2 things, Pat. You have, as you said, kind of a bit of tinkering done with your sire advice already. You kind of go at it in kind of 2 bites basically, and you run 2 options or so. So just explain how you do that, I suppose, and what you're focusing on this year.
Yeah, like, again, going back to the grey here, I'd be more comfortable in terms of picking the bulls. I generally do the catalogue. Sometimes I go on sire advice, and sometimes I look at the old, you know, the active bullets and all that sort of stuff, and you can play with the filters and all that. But I like to see it on paper, and that's the way I do it and whatever. So I generally don't pick the bulls with sire advice. I pick them myself, and then I use the sire advice to allocate those bulls afterwards to the cows. And now the last year or 2 with the sex semen, what I normally do is I run off the sire advice with the sex semen straws, and I run off the sire advice with the conventional straws. I have two sheets in front of me above the parlour, and if a cow comes and she falls in the window of getting the sex semen straw, I look at the sex semen list, and if otherwise I go to the conventional list. In putting that list together, obviously I'll go through and I'll have the ones I don't want to use on dairy straws, I'll have them taken out of that list and all that sort of stuff. So that's what I do with the sire advice. In terms of, was it you were asking about this year?
Yeah, so what are your choices, let's say, or what are you looking at in particular? Is it the same as always, kind of just trying to push forward?
Yeah, it's the same. Look, I you know, it's again following on from the group, like probably, you know, 0.2 protein plus, probably 0.3 fat plus. I suppose maintenance is a big one. It's very hard to get the bulls, or maintenance figures like 15 or something. like I was saying to you yesterday, like I wouldn't be great to look back on figures. I just kind of do the work and let things sort themselves out. But I just, for the purposes of today, I just look back because I was very disappointed with the size of my second calves coming in this year. They're the tallest, most angular, cows we have. And I was looking back and I suppose you could kind of take solace in the fact that they are actually the lowest maintenance figure group we have, and that's probably telling. So like maintenance is so I'd be looking to try and look 15 ideally. I'll probably have to pick bulls from 10 up, to get there. And again, like I see this year, there's a lot more work showing the, say for example, the health, the TB and all that. So I'll focus, do a small bit of work on that as well. If I have a choice between bulls, I'll obviously go with the one with the better figure and the health and all that kind of thing.
Okay, so just I suppose, Dan, you might correct me if I'm wrong here now. Only about 4,000 herds of 17,000 dairy herds complete sire advice in a year, is that correct?
Yeah, so we probably have about 19,000 dairy herds in our plus, so 4,000, so like see that number obviously more this year.
Yeah, so less than half of the herds that are in Herd Plus and only about a quarter of the herds in the country actually run sire advice. So how important, then Pat, last question for you, how important is that sire advice element to you in terms of that allocation piece? I fully accept what you say in terms of using the catalogues to identify the bulls you want to use, but that allocation piece, do you think that's important to you? And what's your feeling on sire advice?
Sure, look, obviously I never questioned them, but I wouldn't know how it runs as such then. But it's very important. Why I would have started on a very basic one is the inbreeding one straight away. That's gone. That's you're not worrying about that. And then it'll take the traits of the cow and it'll try and match it with the bull. So I think it's brilliant. So like I said, look, maybe I should use it to pick the bulls, but that's the way I've been doing it. So once we've got the bulls, I put them in and I run it off, and I use that as my Bible then for the breeding season. And the only issue you have, of course, is when you come towards the end when you're running down on straws that maybe your 3 allocated bulls are not available, and I've often ran it again with just what's left in the tank, and that's kind of it, yeah.
Very good. Okay, so we'll leave it at that with you, Pat. I suppose we'll take from the audience very quickly if people want to, and there's a roving microphone if they are available on Neely there. Neely, will you do the roving microphone? Do you have it? So if people have any questions for Pat, Neely will pop the microphone to you there. Suitably happy?
Just something that happened earlier, that was the maintenance of things from heifers has changed. The new stock here obviously changed direction. You were averaging the herd is about 560, I'd say, but they are stores. So when I got now the new stock there, 2023 or 22 euros versus 13, is it?
Yeah.
So that.
We say our heifers, we say our calves are potentially relative to the heifers, which is calf.
Yeah. Well, there is, like I said, now when Stuart rang me the other day about this, and I was saying, Jesus, sometimes I don't think I have any policy in terms of breeding, Dan. It's just because it's every year's thickness, and you're always doubting. Then am I doing the right thing? Am I picking the right thing? So, actual fact, there's a slight aberration there in the sense that there's some Jersey crosses inside there. I used, like I said before, we used some black and whites from New Zealand. We used Kiwi crosses. We used Jerseys. I drifted away from the Jerseys because I felt uncomfortable with trying to keep the system simple again. It's the bull calf issue and all that, and I kind of shied away from using Jerseys for a few years. I dived back in that year. I don't know why, because it's 3 years ago now, I suppose, or whatever, when we were doing that one, or 4 years ago. So I suppose I felt maybe that was the right way to go. I've come back out of that again. So it's with the last 3 years I've been using black and whites, So that figure of 22 is because there's some Jerseys inside it.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so if there's not, I'm going to hand you over to, thanks very much, Pat. Pete, show your appreciation for that. Hand you over to Seamus Gordon, who you know from the local office, and Seamus and Dennis Howard are going to go through Semen here for you. Dennis is going to give a presentation, and Seamus is going to quiz him, I suppose. So we'll hand over to you, Seamus. Thank you.
This one's working. So look, I suppose one of the major changes I suppose has happened over the last few years, like sex semen has become, I suppose before last 3-4 years, sex semen, maybe 1 in 10 might have tried it. Now I'd say if I asked here, maybe half of me at least have tried it over the last couple of years. And one thing about it, I think, as people have used it, they've started maybe 5%, 10%, and they've increased the amount of usage. And that's all got to do with because the confidence that I think within the farming community has increased with the use of sex semen. So there has been a lot of work done, you know, in relation to sex semen over the last number of years. We have all the protocols that are there now, and Dennis, you go through all that anyway. We know better man than Dennis here now to go through the protocols. But also, you know, I suppose the way the industry has gone, you know, the producing of, I suppose it's mainly Frisian heifers we're looking for, and the importance of sex semen I think is actually coming through. And also I suppose the importance then as well that stop that when we can produce enough heifers that the beef side is also looked after. So from that point of view, look, I think one thing about breeding is to try and make the correct decisions in your herd to get the highest conception rates. And that's what everyone wants to do. You want to get good conception rates, whether you're using conventional or sex semen. And look, I think what we'll probably do here, we'll let Dennis speak now. There'll be a few questions. You'd like questions from the audience, not from me anyway, Dennis. But, so,
I didn't realize Stuart was lining up to ask me as well.
So don't worry, I won't be too bad now. But lads, if you have any questions as we go through, or at the end, probably Dennis is more than welcome to take a minute. So look, I'll hand over to Dennis to start with there now. Thank you.
So hello everyone. So I'm going to do a quick, I suppose, refresh and a bit of a state of play with sex semen and how things are going. So this is a slide belonging to Stephen Butler, and I suppose it's a nice pictorial of what's possible with sex semen. So the picture on the left is conventional only, so that's I suppose the traditional breeding season, where in this case the heifers are getting conventional dairy. Most of the cows are getting conventional dairy, and there's even probably a week of repeats. So that was the conventional system. Over on the right then is total sexed. So again, the heifers are getting sex semen, and I suppose the key thing here then, the first thing you can see is that depending again on the fertility of the herd, there's the possibility here to be very selective with the cows. So actually to drop out a lot of the cows, the poorer performing, lower genetic merit cows, and just beef from the start. So that's one thing. And the other thing then is the actual calf crop, the resultant calf crop that's produced. So again, with your conventional semen, roughly a quarter dairy female, a quarter dairy male, and the rest is beef. And I suppose the possibility then with sexed is that you can increase, you can really reduce down the dairy males, and you can actually increase the value and the number of beef, of high quality beef animals. And I'd say with the prices of beef and beef calves at the moment, there's no one would fall out really with having more beef calves to go through the ring. But, and I think Pat referred to it nicely there, and the reality for most people is it's just like Pat mentioned, it's probably somewhere in between. And the key thing is we want to use sex semen, we want to try and get some of the advantages that we're seeing on this slide without compromising our fertility and our 6-week calving rate that Seamus was talking about. So this is just a slide then, this is some analysis that was done on 2023 first inseminations verified by pregnancy, or verified by calvings in 2024. So this is pretty accurate data looking at the pregnancy rate, which is going to be similar or slightly lower than conception rate, looking at the pregnancy rate to conventional and sex semen in dairy heifers and dairy cows. So this is coming from ICBF and Teagasc. So looking then, this is the average figures, so pretty big numbers, about 50,000 inseminations in heifers, the pregnancy rate of about 66%, and I suppose what's interesting there is the sexed pregnancy rate, with good numbers as well, is only 5% lower. So that gives a relative pregnancy rate of 93%. So the sexed over big numbers and accurate information coming from the calvings, the sext is performing quite close to the conventional and dairy heifers. Looking at the cows then, bigger numbers obviously for conventional semen in the cows, and about 70,000 for the sext, and a pregnancy rate of 57% in cows, 50% for the sext. So that gives a lower relative pregnancy rate of 87%. So I suppose the message from this slide really is, with sext semen, the heifers, the maiden heifers probably represent a better bet and a first choice to call because of the higher pregnancy rate and the higher relative pregnancy rate as well. So then, just I suppose a bit of a refresher on what's different about sext semen compared to conventional semen. And I think we can understand the differences. It goes a long way then that we can put whatever changes we need to make to try and make sure we get a really good result with the sext semen. So the first thing is a lower conception or a lower concentration. So there's less cells inside in the straw. So conventional straw, there's about 15 million cells inside the conventional straw. It's Sexing Technologies is the company that come into Ireland, come into NCBC, come into Dove, so it's the same international company that come in and set up the sexing lab, and they'll put whatever number of sex straw or they'll fill the straw with however many million cells you want. But I suppose the guarantee from Munster for last year, this year, is that it does a guarantee of 4 million cells inside the straw, which is still an hour ways behind the conventional straw at 15 million. The purity then, so the purity means how many of those cells are going to produce a female calf versus a male calf. So the purity is advertised and it actually is realised at 90%. So that little picture there shows 10 sperm cells, so 9 of them will produce a female calf and 1 of them is going to produce a male calf. So if we look at that 4 million straw, 3.6 million of them will produce a female calf, 400,000 will produce a male calf on average. So the lower viability then. So the picture on the right then, it just, I suppose, describes the sexing process. And the sexing process is hard on the semen cells. There's no other way around it. So first of all, they have to take up this dye. Then they must travel down in single file down through the machine. They're traveling at 50 miles an hour. Then depending if they're male or female, they get hit with a laser to put a charge in them. And at the bottom then, the 2 plates there is like a drafting gate. So depending if they're male or female, they're pulled off to one side or the other. So extraordinary technology, but obviously it takes its toll on the sperm cells. And the last thing then that's different is the capacitation. So when a bull breeds a cow, or a cow's AI with conventional semen, the cells go into the uterus and they have this coating of, this protective coating on them. And they must lose that coating then inside in the uterus. So that process is called capacitation, and it takes about 8 to 10 hours inside the cow, this process of capacitation. And the big difference with sext semen is because it's inside in the lab, it's going through the sexing process, temperature controlled, in a special medium, the cells actually go through this process inside in the lab. So what that means with sext semen is it's actually, the minute you AI the cow with sext semen, it's actually ready to fertilise the cow, whereas conventional needs to go through that 8 to 10 hour process. So then, I suppose, what do we need to do? And the first thing, and Patrick was referring to it earlier, is the timing of AI. So, if we just go back to basics, so if we identify a cow at the start of standing heat, it is well proven across lots of studies that the timing of ovulation is fairly set in stone at around 80 or at around 28 hours after the start of standing heat. So the ovulation happens, the egg is released down into the site of fertilization, and that egg then will survive for about 8 to 10 hours. So it's quite fragile. It won't survive that long. So what does that mean then with our timing of AI? So conventional semen will last well in excess of 24 hours. So what that means is we can go in at the very start of standing heat in the knowledge that the conventional sperm cells will travel up, they'll be after capacitating, and they'll be there waiting for the egg to come in. And then the other end of it then, we can go about 12 hours after the end of standing heat with conventional semen. If we go later than that, we're probably cutting it fine that they won't actually be after arriving up and they won't be after going through that capacitation. With sex semen then, so it's lower viability, lower concentration. So when the cow is AI'd or the heifer is AI'd, it won't last as long inside the uterus. So if we go too early with sex semen, it's by the time the egg is released, it'll be after running out of steam and it won't be able to fertilise. So we need to avoid the first 12 hours, so the cow needs to be gone off heat really. So we're talking 12 to 20 hours after the start of standing heat. And you'll see the little purple piece, it just goes a little bit longer than conventional. So, and that's where the capacitation comes in. So because sex semen is after going through that process, we can push the boundaries a little bit and go a little bit later with sexed than we can with conventional. And I suppose I won't go into synchronisation, it's in the back of that breeding fertility notes that I was talking about. But the one thing about synchronisation in heifers and even in small batches of cows is it overcomes the timing of AI. So that's the timing. The next piece is the semen handling and the AI procedure. I should get John Mack up here to talk about the semen handling and the AI procedure, but I suppose in short, you want a clean, descaled flask, cool, the water changed daily. You want the temperature to be very correct, at 35 to 37 degrees. The recommendation for sex semen is 45 seconds, so a minimum of 45 seconds. And then the next thing is they want the straws loaded into pre-warm guns and inside the cow pretty quickly. And I suppose a big part of that really is organisation. So if there's 5 cows in the crush and 2 are getting sex semen, you want to make sure that the 2 cows are together and that you can get to those cows quickly and get them AI'd quickly. The next part then is actually cow and heifer selection. So we'll start with the cows. So obviously the cows need to be calved 50 days plus, so it is the February calvers are the cows that are going to be prioritised for sex. They need to be cycling, so really if you're serious about sex semen, you need to be maybe doing some pre-breeding heat detection, make sure that cows that are going to be getting sexed have actually cycled already. Obviously the collars are a big advantage there, that all that information is going to be there for you. Younger cows, so the graph that's there on the right is from the same analysis that I showed you at the start, but it's actually broken out by lactation group here. So we spoke about the heifers, they're the 0, the group. And then you have the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th. And I suppose, broadly speaking, you can see the conception rate or the pregnancy rate is similar enough for the 1st, 2nd and 3rd, and it starts to drop a little bit for the 4th and drops off a nice bit for the 5th. So, and then the relative conception rate, the 6th kind of is similar for all groups. But really, the message is you want to prioritise younger cows for sex semen. We might talk about the first lactations afterwards. There's a little bit of debate goes on there. Body condition then, the big thing is we want to avoid cows that are struggling for body condition. Then a healthy cow, healthy uterus, so any cow that has any issue during the spring, exclude her, or any cow that has any issue that might affect her uterine health, so hard calving, twins, milk fever, retained afterbirth, any of those kind of things, so good records, and avoid those cows as well. And then I suppose to try and get the cow this time of year, and it was very hard last year, but again, grass is maybe a little bit tight, so the challenge now is to keep cows fully fed coming up to breeding, so that they're on a good plane of nutrition coming up to breeding. And looking at the heifers then, and really what you're talking about with the heifers is above target weight, cycling regularly, and the two of them are very much connected. So heifers that are on target or above target are probably after cycling plenty times before the breeding season comes around. And then again, on a rising plane of nutrition, so if they're out, they've good supply of grass ahead of them. And even last year, a lot of heifers were bred inside, and actually, if there were good silage and a couple of kilos of concentrates, people took the decision to breed them inside and got on pretty well. And the key thing is that they were in a good plane of nutrition and there was no changes around breeding time. So that's just to look at the maintenance figure there. Stuart is going to be talking about it afterwards when the cows come in, and looking at the target weight depending on the maintenance figure. So take your typical cow there of maintenance of 10, the adult or the mature weight of nearly 600 kilos. You're talking about a target breeding weight of 350, which is a fair ask. So that's about it as regards the sex semen. I suppose I'll just mention at the start, I mentioned that there's a real opportunity with sex semen to be more selective about the cows that you actually breed replacements from. And I suppose with that in mind, we've built and trialled this spring, I suppose, a cow calculator, so which combines the genetics and combines the milk recording to try and, I suppose, in a practical sense, really, you're trying to drop out the poorest of your cows and put beef on them from the very start. And then also, I suppose, there's farm ops. So there's a similar tool actually in farm ops. It's called cow breeding decisions. So it's something you can do on your own phone. And then there's also the breeding metrics, and that breeding module, which kind of gives you real-time analysis right through the breeding season. So the lads are outside if you're interested or want a bit of help with any of those things. And then also the little booklet there, the breeding fertility notes. So that's available outside as well if anyone to pick it up.
Lovely. Thanks, Dennis. Now you hold on to that there. Hopefully. Look, and Dennis just went through there, and there was a lot of information there, and I suppose just the two major things. Obviously, picking the right cow is very important, Dennis, and the heifers, that they're in good condition, they never were sick or anything like that during.
There's a lot of work I think has to be done before the breeding season ever starts to try and get good success with sex semen. So, and there's no easy way out of it. I think you just have to try and go through your records, drop out the cows that had any issues, have a look at the body condition score, and drop out the cows that are struggling for body condition, and then after that, then you're trying to get the timing right, and, which is a huge thing. And especially breeding cows too early with sex semen, it's just going to be after running out of steam by the time ovulation happens. So timing is critical as well.
And just one thing I've noticed there, Dennis, maybe commented on there, is that, and just talking to farmers too, is that the selection of bulls has increased a lot over the last couple of years. Maybe 3 years ago, you'd be looking at the bull you might want to use with the sex weren't available. That has changed a lot now, hasn't it?
It has, and I suppose the big thing there is some people are disappointed that the bull was available, conventional, with no sexed, and the reality there is the bull was dead, so there was plenty conventional collected off the bull, and then he was sent on his way. And I suppose with the way things are going, obviously then there's a big effort to try and keep more bulls alive, and at the same goes for proven bulls. They have to get a decent proven bull, they need to be 5 years old, and I suppose the challenge for AI companies is to hold on to these bulls long enough that they'll be available to sex when they actually become proven.
And I just one final thing there, we'll open it there. It's just, when do we use sex semen? When is the right time? Dairy herd there now, I'm starting breeding next week. Is it over the full breeding season?
Good question. I didn't mention it. Yeah. So look, obviously your pregnancy rate, your conception rate is going to be lower. So, and all the effort that you're putting in to try and get a good result is to try and mitigate that reduction in conception rate and try and preserve your 6-week calving rate. So really to try and use it early in the breeding season, the first 2 weeks if possible. Yeah.
That's great. Look, I think we'll open it up. Go down the road, so thank you.
Dennis, I suppose it's a question that we all come across a lot. Should farmers use sex semen on first calvers? Just what do you think, your own opinion?
Yeah, I kind of referenced it there. It was teeing up a question, Tom, and thanks for asking it. Yeah, and I suppose if we look, like, you'd often hear about this, that the first calvers might be under that much pressure, or they might be bad candidates. If we look at the raw data coming from that analysis, they were actually the group with the highest conception rate, a very good relative conception rate. But saying that, depending on the herd, depending on the system, you will get first calvers that are struggling a bit. That might be struggling for body condition, or mightn't have caught it off, or whatever. So I think if you apply all the criteria to the first calvers should have a good high conception rate. But if you apply the body condition, calve long enough, healthy cow, healthy uterus, there's no reason why I wouldn't use it in first calves. But some will drop out, obviously the ones that are struggling will drop out, yeah.
Neil.
Like Dennis, just follow on from that, you've gone through the criteria and accountability, but is there, in terms of using sex semen on a herd level, is there some criteria in terms of 6-week calving rate or calving interval that the farmer may or may decide not to use sex semen, or just come down to individual cow level?
That's a good question, Grania, and I think obviously if you have good fertility performance, it stands to reason that you have a higher conception rate, and I would say obviously those herds that are getting good figures already are probably more suitable for sex semen, whereas herds that are struggling maybe with conventional semen, yeah, I don't think that struggle is going to get easier with sex semen for sure. Yeah,
I think that looks... Is there any more questions?
Just one thing there, sorry.
Andrew?
The financial cost of a repeat, like 3 or 4 years ago, it was around 360 to 70 euros. So just the financial cost of repeats, your conventional versus sex semen, well, you will have a few more repeats there. So the cost, I might be wrong regarding this, but the cost there about 3 or 4 years ago was about 360 to 70 euros. The financial cost of covering repeated performance and so on. What's the update figure regarding the cost of financial cost of repeat?
I'd say it is very, very dependent on the herd, Andrew. Obviously, it's going to be like some Pat's herd there. It is going to be higher anyway than the average. But I think we're back to that mitigation and that effort, and you'll get plenty of herds now that are actually achieving parity with conventional and sexed. And that's purely down to the effort of picking cows and really by the town and the timing of making sure that the timing is right. And herds that put in, or herd owners that put in that effort, it is possible to actually achieve parity, you know, so you're not comparing like with like. Obviously, any cow that has any issues at all, or you're not sure the heat is getting conventional. So I suppose it's the title of this really, trying to stack the odds in favour of the sex semen. But it is possible to get, I suppose, it's possible to get good results anyway and almost achieve parity.
Oh, Richard has one there.
Through the chair. At the start when sex semen came out, obviously the differential was -10% in conception. It's comforting to see that has improved or gone up within 6%. The school of thought, Dennis, that you would start earlier if you were using sex semen, you know, conventional. We start in May. One school of thought that if you were using sex semen, that you should start a bit earlier to allow for the point that Andrew touched on, to repeat your thoughts.
Personally, you don't want to upset your system just because of sex semen, Richard. You know, so maybe a little bit earlier. Another option that's probably getting a little bit more common is like maybe synchronise a small bunch of cows at the start, and maybe along with your heifers. And again, you're trying to gain time, and if you're obviously synchronising, you're pulling their mating start date back a bit and mitigating a little bit again for the reduced conception rate. So I'd probably be inclined to maybe do that instead of starting much earlier anyway, you know, because then they're going to have early calves, or if you're compact, you like to dry off for Christmas. You wouldn't like to upset your system too much just because of sex semen. That'd be my own take.
One final question.
Yeah, just maybe a follow on as well from that is that the last two speakers had questions related to, you know, successes and Semen really and its impact. But I suppose the one thing I would add is that Munster Bovine don't sex any bull that don't have a field fertility. It's just that as well. It's that other bit of, you know, assurance that we put in place. We don't sex any young bulls, and all the bulls that are sexed have good field fertility. And if there was a bull maybe with below average field fertility, they're not sexed. So that's just something else as well. That's why. So it's all those factors that combine that make, along with the farmers' own records. I think that's why we're seeing the success of Semen on Irish farms.
Lovely. I think that's a nice way to finish. So, look, thank you, Dennis. I think that's that section now on Semen. Adam Dillon, I think, is next now. So Adam will be here, and the CBV and the beef animal there. So.
Okay, thanks. Right, who's out there? Okay. What we're going to do, this is kind of a split section here, so Chris Daly from ICBF is going to do a live demo. We have a couple of cattle to bring in here, and he's going to go through them in the ring and explain a bit about them there in a minute. Just while that's getting ready, I'll go through a couple of slides, just talking a bit about, I suppose, making your beef breeding choices for the year ahead, okay? I suppose making use of the CBV, right? So I don't know exactly, most of your presumer dairy farmers here, I don't know about the interaction you're getting or the amount of questions you're actually getting on CBV from people that are actually buying your calves. It is making a difference in terms of the quality of the calves, in terms of what's coming through with the other end. But I suppose there's still probably a lag there in terms of the actual drive from the beef side of the house to look for higher genetic bird calves. I suppose this year is very different to last year. Last year, this time of the year, you're all in trouble selling calves, most of you. There was big trouble getting rid of these calves off farm. They're making very little in Marts. Total opposite this year. Beef prices shot out of control all of a sudden, out of the blue. It wasn't predicted. And suddenly calves are in vogue and everyone wants to take a calf away with them. So, I suppose, if we're to go through, right, basically what is the CBV? It's basically a tool to produce higher genetic merit calves, and it gives you an indication of the beef merit of the calves on the ground, okay? How does it work? It's a euro value based on the genetics of the parents. Okay, so it takes the dam and the sire into account, and it comprises 6 traits from the beef sub-index and 10 from the carbon sub-index. So the big one, I suppose, what we're trying to focus on today is trying to focus a bit on the beef sub-index. Okay, and how do you pick a bull that's going to produce a calf that's going to do the goods at the end of the day, right? And it's generated for all cattle that are likely to be finished. Okay, so there is cohorts of cattle I go through in a second that aren't going to have a CBV, but anything that's likely to be heading down the line of being slaughtered at some stage will have one. Okay. So who doesn't get the CBV, right? Number one thing is if there's no sire, and dairy farmers are notorious for the last number of years for not recording the beef sire. We did a scan through about 2,000 calves on the Moderator farms in the DairyBeef programme a couple of years ago, and around 40% of beef sired animals that we looked at had no sire recorded. They just had a dam, or just a breed, that was it, nothing else. So we need the sire recorded, whether it's the eye sire or a stock bull. If you're in the genotyping programme, we can do it for you, it's done automatically. Okay? Who else doesn't get it? If the recorded sire wasn't in the same herd as the dam, if a matching AI sire wasn't recorded at some point between 270 and 375 days prior to the birth of the animal, if the animal is pedigree, if the animal is female and is calved, and mark boards will only display the CBV where the sire has been recorded and the animal has been genotyped. So if you have a genotype, it'll stick up here on the board when it's going to the ring. If you don't have a genotype, you can still have a CBV that you can print off yourself if people are buying calves off your farm, but it won't appear here. Because look, call a spade, you can stick anything down as a sire if you want. Genotyping is the only way of guaranteeing it is what it is, right? So making use of it. Animals are assigned into one of 3 different breeds. They're assigned a star rating of 1 to 5, and the CBV profile is available through ICBF Herd Plus. So you go into your ICBF Herd Plus, you click on profiles, and you can see CBV, and you get a list of every animal you've registered on your herd, okay? As I said, it'll be included in the mark boards for their genotype, and these are the categories that are there, right? So, okay, you've got sucklers there, you've beef dairy and dairy, and you can see the difference, right? Obviously the suckler ones are going to have much higher CBB because it's beef on beef. You have dairy and beef, which is be higher than dairy and dairy. You can see that the euro value of, let's say, a 5-star beef dairy one is 124, a 1-star is under 44, okay? So that's the way they're categorised. If we look at the dairy ones then, so these are your Frisians, your maybe crossbred ones, Norwegian Reds, whatever it is, something like that. You're going to be probably just around the 44 mark for a 5-star one, and you'll be down under 1 or maybe negative territory for a 1-star one, okay? Now typically some Frisians can be hitting up into around that 40 to 50 kilo or 40 to 50 euro bracket if there's probably a bit of British genetics or something in the background there. If you're dealing with more crossbred ones, etc., down is going to be, okay? That makes sense. Right, and there you can see a picture of the Mart board. So look at this, is just a CBB profile. Alright, so you've got a number of dairy beef ones and dairy ones there. So this is what will appear when you click on profile on your Herd Plus and you look down, you see right what's there in front of you. And this is basically the end game for this should be that you're selling calves and calves being bought based on these figures, okay? That once the animal is genotyped, we can verify the sire, we can verify the dam, and we have a fair idea of what the animal is going to turn into. That you'll be able to sell your calves based on CBV. Now obviously the health and the look of the calf comes into it too, but it's very hard, as we'll show in a minute, to tell the difference between cattle and calves at a young age when they're running through rings or they're running around inside the pen. Very tricky thing to do. So this is a way of just assisting you in making your decision on what an animal is worth, or for the person buying a calf and what they're going to pay you. Okay? So you can see here, if you look across the top, we just have a Eurostar value. So we start off at 110, and it's 4-star within breed, and we drop down to the bottom, it's a dairy, a Frisian, it's a good one though, 44 euros, so it's a 5-star within breed, okay? And looking across the top then, carcass weight is decided upon. The higher star ones within and across breed will have a higher weighting for carcass weight, and the carcass conformation will be better, carcass fat, feed intake and docility, okay? So does CBV work? Well, if you look at the data, it says it does. So I just have, just in the interest of time, I'm just going to show you the dairy ones here. So if you look at the middle column there, the middle box, here, this one, dairy steers finished in 2024 by CBV. So you can see here, the top ones there had a CBV of 59. They were 325 kilos when they were killed and 822 days, okay? If we drop down here to the bottom category, minus 42, okay? So these would be very poor, I suppose, Frisian genetics, crossbred genetics, whatever it is like that. These would be at the bottom end of things. You have minus 42 of a CBV, 274 kilos of carcass, and 858 days. Okay, so you're talking in and around 50 kilos extra carcass, and you're talking an extra 35 days feeding. Okay, so if we put 3 euros a day of feed costs alone, it's an extra 100 euros got in terms of the feeding, and you're at carcass. So carcass at the minute is worth nearly, I suppose, say 7 euros a kilo even for dairy bred stock. You're talking 350 euros. So between the top and the bottom, there's probably 450 euros today between a woman and a man. Okay? So multiply that across 100 heads, that's 45,000. That's a good wage. You know? This is the difference that can be made by picking high CBV, making the effort in terms of the breeding, and it's probably even more pronounced on the dairy beef side. Okay? So using DBI, so this is for you, the dairy farmer, when you're picking your bulls, what do you do, right? Decide which breed you want to use to suit your herd. So look, some of you want all early matured, some of you want to put in a bit of continental, some of you want to mix it up, do a bit of this and a bit of that. There's no real problem on what way you want to go, right? Select the appropriate sires for your cow groups. So you have some heifers, you'll have first calvers, you'll have mature cows, you'll have varying sizes, etc. And look, generally go for higher carcass weight and beef value, okay, and pick within your calving range, okay? So look, if we want to put a rough figure to try and give you a guide again today as to picking these bulls, look at the DairyBeef index on the DBI. So don't pick the overall index. The overall index is probably not the main thing to look at, this overall DBI index. Look at the DairyBeef sub-index, okay? And I'd say a figure there, a simple figure to remember, is 100 euros. Okay, when you're picking your bull, has the bull got a minimum 100 euros on the DBI? Okay. Another way of looking at it then is early maturing breeds aim for around 10 kilos of carcass. Okay, every bull you pick, Angus, Hereford, Blues, Limousines, whatever it is, they'll have a carcass figure. Okay, 10 for an early maturing and 0 to 20 for a continental. Okay, there are 3 simple figures. So 100 for the DairyBeef index, 10 kilos for an early mature, and 20 for continental. Okay, if you have poor beef birth cows, okay, and I'll go to that in a second, ramp it up a bit. Okay, you probably, for someone else, maybe if you have Jersey genetics in, things like that, you probably need to push it probably close to 30 kilos or more carcass to counteract that effect of the cow, okay? And that will give you a calf that should perform just as well as maybe a 20 kilo one and maybe a Frisian cow, okay? So these are just the things you have to get into your head to figure out, right? So areas to consider when picking your bulls for using the DBI. The high DBI bulls doesn't always translate, I suppose, into a bull with high beef trait. So if we look at 2 bulls here, right, this is just the Angus breed here. So just put this up in the DBI, and if you look at it, we've got that first bull there, number 1, AA7485, right, Prohurst Owen W759, right. Okay, so if we look at here across, he's got a DBI of 192. And the big one here, if your guide is buying a bull, or you're buying a calf off a cow that's been bred by this bull, you want to see what the carcass is. He's plus 17 kilos for carcass, which is excellent for an Angus. Okay, that's at the top end of things when you're talking Angus bulls. Okay, if you look at the second bull here, he's AA4743. Okay, Kilnamartyra is what he's called. Okay, he's got a similar-ish DBI, not too much back. He's 177. He's still quite strong. But if you look at the carcass of this bull here, it's only 2 kilos, okay? So there's 15 kilos between one and the other. That's something to bear in mind. So if you look at the top 3 bulls, they've AA4089 is another one there, a very popular bull as well. He's got a DBI of 172, so he's 172, 177 and 192, all very strong in the DairyBeef index. But just to focus on that carcass figure, that's really what the beef farmer is looking for when he's buying those calves. He wants to get the highest carcass bull use as you're happy to use, basically. So basically, pick your carcass, pick your beef sub-index, look at the calving interval, gestation length, should I say, and look as well at the calving difficulty. Pick what suits you, and pick those bulls. That's the way you work it. Simple enough. Okay, so breeding a better calf. What you do also have to look at then is the beef sub-index of your own dairy herd. So if you look at your EBI scorecard, you get an average you can see the average of the herds. The average of 1-star herds is minus 18. The average of 2-star herds is minus 9. The average of the country, we say the average of 3-star herds is minus 5. And the average of 4-star herds is minus 2. And the average of 5-star herds is plus 2. So identify the desired calf CBV, depending on what you want, and use beef bulls in with a minimum beef sub-index to meet the herd CBV requirements. Okay? And again, check again to make sure you're not going anywhere too extreme on the calving difficulty or gestation length. So if you look there in the middle, you can see this figure here. The beef element there on your scorecard, the average here in the country is minus 5, okay? So if we look at where you want to go in terms of using, let's say from the Angus and Hereford bulls to achieve a 4- and 5-star DairyBeef calf, you look, are you in the 1-star bracket there? You have to use a bull with a beef sub-index of 91. If you want to achieve 103 of a CBV, you want to use a bull there with 106. 1 through 8, 160, etc. So basically, if you're in the herds with the poorer beef merit, you have to use a higher beef merit bull, essentially, is what we're saying. When you look down here, look at the 5-star herds where they're plus 2, you can use a bull there with a 71 DBI to get a beef bull of 78. So basically, the cow can counteract some of the effects of the bull, etc. that you're using. Okay. So that's essentially it. I suppose what we're going to do now is Chris is going to run in, or going to run in a couple of cattle there now. They're going to show, I suppose, in practice what this means between picking 2 different bulls and putting them on similar types of cows.
Just maybe a few points on the CBV. Look, traditionally, ICBF and Herd Plus, there was only a service there really for breeding herds. So you had the EBI for the dairy farmers and the Eurostars for sucklers. But about 3 or 4 years ago, ICBF and Teagasc came together, and we saw that it was a space that there was information very much lacking in. It was the person buying animals, because there's over 20,000 herds in the country that don't breed, they don't calve any cows. They're buying all their animals live, and there wasn't really any tool there for them. So that's where the CBV came from. I suppose from a dairy farmer's perspective, and look, the last couple of years probably are a good example of 2 sides of the coin. You take 2023 when milk price probably wasn't great. Farmers probably put a bit more focus on, or maybe valued the income from calves that little bit more. This year, where milk price is pretty good, but also calf prices are very high, probably isn't a huge help to the CBV, because even poor calves, I suppose, are making decent money. But as Alan demonstrated, even where all cattle are making decent money at factory level now, there is a big difference between the good and the bad. But I think still, and Alan or even some of the dairy advisors here could comment, there's probably still a level of apathy maybe from dairy farmers on the beef calves. A lot of farmers might think, look, beef calf, we just want to get them out the gate. But for the person buying them, it is important that you're producing as good a quality a calf as possible. I think Alan's slide there on the cows is a very important one, because even within a dairy herd, and it could be a very consistent herd of all black and white, no crossbreed or anything, there is a big difference in the beef merit of the dairy cows, okay? So for example, when you're finished your 6 weeks of the eye with the dairy straws and you move to maybe the beef, putting the same bull across all your cows, then beef bull is not really up to scratch, because some cows will need a much better quality bull than others. Then just maybe on the sire advice there, and like traditionally sire advice only dealt with the dairy side of it, but now it's taking into account the beef as well, and it's matching the cows to the beef bulls as required as well. So you might just touch on that as well, how sire advice is now very useful for the beef maidens as well.
Yeah, so Chris, I suppose like dairy farmers are used to putting their dairy bulls into the application tool and running it through. The dairy beef matings, while it's been growing the last couple of years, I suppose we do see farmers buying beef AI straws from the various AI companies, and you are picking out the beef bulls, maybe not with the same degree of maybe interest, but you are doing it nonetheless. So the dairy beef matings in the programme is designed, I suppose, to reassure every dairy farmer here. We're trying to produce a live dairy beef calf in the ground first. That's the first thing the programme is trying to do, is not trying to create a mating that will create a dead calf. I just want to stress that, with a big underline on that. But what it is trying to do is that if you're picking a range of beef bulls, maybe Hereford, Angus, etc., with a range of beef indexes, the application tool will try and match or mate those beef bulls. So maybe the ones with better beef index, they put your more mature cows, bigger cows that are able to calve. Maybe that may be a little bit slightly marginally higher calving, so potentially, depends on what you're picking. But again, it's trying to improve the beef merit of the calf. So if we just only stick in the beef AI cows you plan on using this year, again, it will improve the beef merit, and you can select the dairy beef option there on it. So you can generate both a dairy and beef mating every cow in your herd. You might decide to finish the AI after 3 or 4 weeks, and you can switch over to your to beef. So that tool is in it as well. So again, try and, if you only enter in the beef bulls and run it through, it should generate potentially, hopefully a better beef merit calf being produced that will be coming to the ring here spring 2026.
Yeah, excellent Dan. So again, just like the dairy service, I can't think of the man from Kilnamartyra's name again, sorry. What's her name? Pat, sorry. As Pat said about the dairy side of it, it takes the guesswork out. It'll take the guesswork out on the beef side as well, very much, so it's definitely a tool that's worth using. Look, just on a couple of animals. So what we have is we have 2 Angus heifers. Look, probably both, I'd say were they bought as calves? Yeah, so they were both bought as calves. The animal in the ring is the low CBV one of the 2. So I don't know if you can see it there. I'll just change this to a pointer. So you can see that there, so €60 is the CBV, so that's the euro value that Alan mentioned. And what you have then is you have a star rating within the breed type and a crossbreed. So within the breed type for these is dairy beef. So it's comparing this animal to all other dairy beef animals. So it's a 2-star, so it's ranked between 20 and 40%, so it's below average. The crossbreeds then, it's coming in as a 2-star as well, so that's ranking it against suckler animals and everything else. A critical figure Alan talked about was the carcass weight. So this animal actually is negative on carcass weight, okay? So that's a combination of the genetics of the sire and dam. So you know, you'll see with the next animal now, it has a much higher CBV and it has a higher carcass weight value as well. You have the other traits in there as well, so conformation, so that's your EUROP scale, so it's actually negative in conformation as well. Aged finish is negative, that's good. You want the negative figure for aged finish, you want a shorter finishing period, and then you have a couple of traits in there as well. Feed intake is actually a very interesting one because it's not something a farmer really sees or can measure. The facility that's used in Ireland to measure feed intake is Daly in County Kildare, and the daily intake of the cows can be measured, of the animals is measured, okay? And what this is just telling you is the animal's genetic merit for feed intake. So the lower that figure actually the better, and if it's negative, that's actually a good thing, you want the negative figure. And look, docility, it doesn't have a huge impact on the CBV, but it is in there. And look, we all know that, you know, docility, it's important from a labour point of view. You know, we don't want to be spending time chasing cattle, especially if you're part-time, and just from a health and safety point of view as well. So they're the key traits, okay? The second animals come in, and look, there is a visible difference between them and the weights here. So the low CBV animal, the one on your right, is 320 kilos, and the one on your left is 360 kilos. So they're both around the same age, and there's 40 kilos of a difference between them at yearlings. You'd expect that gap is going to widen over the coming 12 months towards finish. So the high CBV animal is 114, so it's almost double the CBV. Its carcass weight is plus 5.4, so different to the last one. It has a positive carcass weight. Conformation is slightly positive as well, so there's an improvement there. A negative age of finish, so -8 days, that's a good thing. Look, feed intake and the docility, there's not a huge difference between them. But the star rating shows you, so within the dairy beef population, the higher CBV animal is a 4-star, so it's 2 stars more than the last animal. And that, I suppose the key point here is that as calves, they probably both looked exactly the same, and probably cost exactly the same amount of money. But now I know we're probably at an extreme at the moment with beef price, but like there could be hundreds between them then at slaughter.
Yeah, now, however the man is that, or the woman is whoever it is that Rarely is an exceptional job. They're well ahead of target now. They're excellent stock, but they are both of them. They're done well. But yeah, you could see probably, 40 kilos of carcass or 30 kilos of carcass at the end of the day is, it's probably 250 euros depending on what type of animal you're selling. These type of animals, the next week or so they could be, hitting 750, 8 euros a kilo. So it's suddenly the gap is widening and the value of CBVs is becoming more pronounced now as beef price increases.
Yeah, and look, I suppose it's not to say that the lower CBV animals shouldn't be bought, but it's just so that farmers know the genetic merit of the animals when buying them, so that very high genetic merit animals they can give a bit more for them, and maybe lower genetic merit animals they can give a bit less. Because traditionally, and Jordan you probably see in the Marts, is that Angus bull calves on a day have a price. But with the CBV and with some unknown, the lower ones, a fella can know a little bit less for them because they don't have the genetics. But the really good ones, then I can afford to give a bit more because they leave it back to me. So, as I said, if there was a dairy sale here, farmers would have DBIs on the animals. The sucklers, they have the replacement index. It's only fair that the people buying these animals have the genetic information on them as well to make a better decision. Look, that's really it, the information. Look, if there's any questions or observations, fire them out. Look, as Alan said, for the animals that have the CBV and the Mart board, they have to be genotyped. The reason being just a bit of quality control, because unfortunately in all walks of life there's people who maybe make things up. They'll say, right, I'll put some good AI sire down on my animal to get a good CBV in the Mart, but that's blocked because the animals have to be genotyped. But if they're not genotyped and you're selling off farm, you'll still have the CBVs on your profile when you log in, but you have to be in Herd Plus for that, obviously. So, just out of interest, anyone selling calves directly off farm, have people been asking for CBVs? Hands up, people have been asked for it. That's a bad sign, so. You're getting away likely so at the moment. There probably is a little bit of apathy still, and maybe that's the reason that farmers are just happy to go in and buy calves because they're Angus or Blues or Sementals, but
It's probably fair to say this isn't the best year, I suppose, with fellas probably a bit more anxious for calves and exporters sending out a lot of them, etc. And you're probably dealing with it's a seller's market this year for calves, so people aren't probably as fussy. But look, we'll get the bad year again, and that's probably when these kind of things, the choosiness will set in again. So if you're set up and you've made the effort and you have good calves year on year, you know, people will know to go back to you and they'll be watching this and they'll be, you know, you have a ready-made market.
yeah, but I suppose, and to go to Stuart, like, it's about future-proofing too, so the decisions made now in the next 6 weeks will affect the calves born next year, and next year's market could be very different, so there's no point saying sure calves were a flyer this year, I just put the cows and calf to any Angus and I'd be able to sell them, because that could change very fast. So it's very much about future-proofing.
Yeah, I suppose the interesting thing, and it's kind of tying in with what I'll be talking about in a second, is I was looking at some other stock for the event on Thursday in Corn, and just the sources of the, would say, like the lad said there, the cow influence on the calf as well. So it's important that people are aware of it, would say. So Munster have a range of Angus bulls basically, and if you choose the easiest calving, lowest carcass weight one to put on your most negative beef cow, basically, you're going to get a middling enough calf basically to sell on. Whereas there are options there basically to use those higher carcass weights greater than the 10 kilos. There are bulls in the catalogue there that are 18 and 20 kilos Anguses that people can use, and that compensates then for the negative beef element of the cow, I suppose, and helps to deliver a much better calf then. Okay, so it's like Chris has said there, the decisions that you make on the day that the cow is standing in the crush, yes, it's slightly more complicated to say I want straw A and straw B rather than saying give me 2 of straw A. And the technicians won't thank me for saying that. Obviously, my father was a technician for years and he used to give out knowing about all the different bulls that used to have to go in. And Tom knows him well as well. He used to be giving out to Tom as well about all these different bulls. So, but it is actually the difference between delivering an average calf and a good quality calf. And it's about that circular economy that the beef lads get good quality stock that they can bring in and sell here, which are or send on to the factory or whatever and get adequate reward for them, okay?
And look, just a common misconception as well when the CBV came out was some people thought that it was just a sire, but it's the total genetics of the calf. Like, it's all the indexes ICBF creates, EBI, replacement index, CBV, it's the combined effect of the sire and dam. And the beauty of the Mart board is it's only genotyped animals, so they're genomic CBVs as well, which would be that little bit more accurate. I suppose just the last point I'd make, and I think there's a couple of dairy cows to come in, but if you have a dairy cow, if we just had one dairy cow in front of us and she has a particular beef merit, right, and we could have 100 different AI bulls across lots of different breeds to pick from, the bull that will give you the highest CBV calf will be the bull with the highest beef sub-index within its DBI, all the time. When your cow is a constant, whatever bull has the highest beef sub-index, that's what's going to give you the highest CBV calf. Now obviously as a dairy farmer you have to take the calving difficulty and gestation into account. That's what the overall DBI figure does. But if you want to maximise your CBV, it's the beef sub-index within the DBI is what tells you that. It's a very straightforward thing to focus on. So I suppose it's getting the gestation length and the calving difficulty level that the farmer's comfortable with, and then trying to maximise the rest is I think what's key.
But it's very doable.
Yeah, it is very doable, and you know, in fairness, across all the egg companies, they have gone to a big effort to source, I suppose, what are typically outlier bulls, the ones that aren't going to kill your cows, but will give you that carcass afterwards.
There's actually a radiator on the counter here in front of us, so you're probably getting cold there. So, which in the interest of time, we'll finish up. Jerry might leave those on, and I'll just take thanks for that, and I'll just go on, I'll do the last piece here then, and Jerry might just leave in the cows and say, will you leave in one at a time just so we can get away from them. So just, look, I'll just highlight this from Dairygold's point of view. They have started to incentivise the breeding and the genetics. So the EBI element of it is important, and so is the DBI element, and there's a cent per litre available for that, and I've highlighted here in the red here. So just for people to be aware that DairyBeef index is a recommendation for 2025 and will be a prerequisite for 2026 to get the grassroots bonus, okay? So in order to be eligible for the bonus in 26, the following actions will need to be taken in 25, and Alan talked about some of this already. So genotype every beef stock bull, so if you have beef stock bulls, they need to be genotyped in the 2025 breeding season, and record the sire of all calves born in 2025 is an important thing that people need to take note of as well, okay? And then finally, use AI, use AI and our stock bulls with a minimum of 3-star rating on DairyBeef index within and or across the breed, and a minimum of 3-star rating on the beef sub-index of the DBI within and or across the breed as well, okay? So that's just to be aware of that. In order to qualify for the bonus, you're going to have to be doing those things, okay? I talked to the Dairygold staff there afterwards if you want any clarifications on it, okay? So the last piece, and I'll only be 5 or 6 minutes maybe doing this, is just to focus on the maintenance. And again, my thanks to Con for dropping in these cows here today to us. And I'm just waiting to see what we're doing. So 555, right? So basically what I want to demonstrate here today is the actual maintenance sub-index piece, okay? So Pat talked about it when he was up here, about €15 is his maintenance sub-index. I suppose the simple concept is that large cows have a large maintenance requirement. So this lady here, she should be 2030, she weighed 635 kilos there when Jer put her up in the scales. The zero maintenance value is 640 kilos, and you can see on the table here that there's a range. So minus 10 is 690 kilos, and 30 will be 490 kilos, okay? So there's a little equation done here. Ashton Caffrey, our nutritionist, was saying to me the other day, we would have used 4 in the past year, but Ashton was saying that following on from some work that has been done in Moore Park. And I suppose coming back to the genetics that Pat was talking about there a while ago as well, so cows are actually consuming more now. So we multiply their live weight by 4.5 kgs, and we can get a figure for what they need in terms of maintenance requirement in dry matter terms, okay? So you can see we have a range there from the minus 10 of 3,105 kgs of dry matter down to 2,205 kgs of dry matter for the €30 maintenance. So basically, you're looking at slightly lower requirement of maintenance for just the standstill. So this lady here, you can let her in, Jara, if you can, please. This lady here is bigger, so she's 635 kilos versus 555 kilos, okay? And that's actually very, very close to accurate. Now, they're both third lactation cows out of concert. So they both calved there in the month of February. I think actually one of them might have just calved at the start of this month. And that maintenance figure that you see on your EBI report is reflective of a third lactation in mid-lactation. So there's a small bit ahead of time in terms of what they should be weighing at that stage. And there was a big trial done last year as well to try to further verify that maintenance of index as well. Okay, so basically on paper, the cow 2030, who was 635 kilos, is minus 5 for maintenance. So she should be somewhere in and around 665 kilos. So we're fairly close to the mark at our 635. And our 2049, the one on your left as you're looking, and it's quite obvious that there's a size difference between these cows. She's €15 maintenance, so she's the cow that Pat was talking about when he was up here. His herd average is in around 15. That's his average, obviously. He has some cows that are maybe slightly smaller, and then there are some cows that might be slightly bigger as well. But on average, the herd is €15 for maintenance, and they should be in and around 565 kgs. And we saw there that she weighed 535, so it's quite a good indication of body size. So you can see, I suppose, the problem with the larger cow really is, like, there isn't a huge amount of difference in terms of the milk performance of these cows, okay? So the important point I would like to make to people here is that if you have good genetics in this large cow here, she can produce a lot of milk and a lot of milk solids. Equally so, this smaller cow here can produce every bit as much milk and every bit as much solids as well if she's bred in order to do so, right? However, what is the difference? The difference is that the cow that George just turned there, 2030, needs more feeding just to stay going, basically. So they can produce all that milk, and you can potentially see it and compensate that these are kind of a legacy of maybe poor decisions around breeding a couple of years ago that are maybe not focusing on the maintenance. Pat, you said it as well, that maintenance came to the fore maybe a couple of years ago, wouldn't have been something that was majorly on the radar. And Connor's trying to breed down these cows, but obviously he can't get rid of all of them. He has to milk what he has, and he's breeding those through. So this lady's massive. He said, when I rang Con looking for these cows, he said, I have one for you now, definitely she's going to fit the bill to show this situation. So this lady could milk quite well, but you can see that she's probably a little bit more on the pointed side maybe. So she's going, if she milks really well, she's going to struggle to keep her own body condition up, whereas the lady on the right, as you're looking at her there, will have more potential to be kind of a bit more robust and to survive any challenges that might come at them. So look, this is a fictitious example because, as I said, it is an average. There's nobody going to have a herd of all -5s and all 15s, okay? But just to put it into context, there's 450 kgs of dry matter of a difference in terms of the maintenance requirement of our tall lady here and the smaller lady on the left here. So 450 kilos of dry matter, depending on how you put that in front of your cow, is it as grass, is it as silage, or does it end up being as concentrate? That's going to dictate how much it's going to cost. So grass is 11 cents a kilo roughly, so it's going to cost €50 more to keep the taller lady if it's all coming from grass. But the other side of the coin then is if that all comes from concentrate, and we put it at 40 cents a kilo on a dry matter basis, so that's kind of saying that you're maybe paying $3.50 a tonne or so, it's actually going to be up on €180 extra. So she can do the same in terms of milk solids delivery as the other cow, or vice versa, but there's a larger cost to actually just maintaining her, okay? So if we were to scale that up, and as I said, it's just fictitious, but it's for a little bit of shock factor, I suppose. If we were to say that it was on a herd basis, and you had 100 cows, or national average kind of size herd, and you had all of these -5 ladies versus a herd of the 15s that Pat has spoken about earlier, there's a range of a difference in terms of keeping those animals of €5,000 to €18,000 in terms of cost. So you'll never write a check for it because you really, as such, because you won't be writing it to feed that herd of cows, but you will just end up feeding those cows more during the course of the year. You'll never really realise it, okay? So the big thing, so when we're recommending it, what we're talking about in terms of maintenance is, I think, the happy medium for most people. If we didn't have the 2030 in here, I think most people would be quite happy with 2049, that smaller cow, that she's a fine solid cow, and that people would be happy with the size. Donaberry will say to people that the way people decide what their maintenance figure is for them is go out into your field of cows, identify the cows that you like most in your herd, and have a look and see what their figure is, and that's the one that's going to decide for you. So it may vary. Say I'm looking at Andrew there. Andrew, you'll probably be happier with smaller cows. There are some people who prefer to be tending towards this lady here, but the reality of it is we need to be moving down the size of the cow in terms of efficiency and just making them cheaper to run. It's basically buying a more efficient car the next time we're buying it, whether it's electric or whether it's diesel or whatever, right? It's just buying one that will get the extra miles per gallon out of them. This kind of cow here is just able for a little bit of hardship is the wrong term to use, but if we get a bit of a wobbly period, they'll mind themselves, but they still produce milk because we've bred them that way, okay? So it's important to point that out. Whereas these ladies here, because that maintenance requirement is that bit higher, they do need to get more in order to stay going, okay? So look, as I said, they say you should never come between people and their food, and I'm already doing that. So I'll take any questions if you have any, but we'll wrap it up with that. And again, I'd just like to thank Con, thank Pat, thank John O'Callaghan for providing us with the cattle, and I didn't thank Jared and the staff of the Mart here for the use of the facilities, and all the Munster staff and the Dairygold staff and my own Teagasc staff as well that have helped to organise these events. And Brendan, I think you want to say a few words maybe? Reluctantly.
Jay, 2 minutes. Look, Pat, I'm fortunate enough to be in a discussion group with Pat Cronin, and he's an inspiration all the time. But I get a district bollocking there from Andrew every year about being overstocked and everything, you know. But Pat increased his herd size a couple of years ago, and correct me if I'm wrong, Pat, but he discovered that he was making less profit. He reduced cow numbers and got more per cow. His strategy, and I see it there because I pass and I'd be snooping out over the old ditch looking at what he's at. But Pat never grazes out paddocks too tight. Some of us are crucified for golf ball grazing. Pat doesn't do that. He grazes lightly, and he keeps grass quality by using round bales to manage grass that's getting out of hand. And that's why Pat has the performance, and it's a lesson to us all. We're in derogation territory. Many of us are carrying too many cows. We need to reduce numbers, stop exporting slurry. It's going to save us money. Pat has done it. He's shown today that it's delivering, and well done, Pat. For the lads here on the CBV, for Alan and Chris, that's a great bit of work. And it's great to see that, you know, taking Andrew's situation with Jersey crosses, that you can deliver a good beef calf even from that type of cow. And it's obvious that this type of cow here that we should all be targeting, medium-sized cow, good body depth, doing the same as the higher kilo cow, definitely the way to go. To Munster Bovine for organising this, Stuart, Ger Sullivan and his staff, Dan Reardon and Seamus Lorden was up here earlier, Neely from ICBF, Conley for bringing the cows. Thanks to you all. And finally, one thing that was mentioned was breeding heifers from high BI herds and selling those heifers to farmers who might be struggling trying to get enough protein. Like, that's a great, I have seen figures where that can deliver huge results internationally or nationally here in this country and for the co-ops if the very high merit heifers were bred by those who were really good at it and move them on. And maybe it's something that all of us, if we're not up to target on solids, we should be looking to our neighbours who have very good stock and try and, as Pat said, if there's a contract, well, go for it. And look, Gerard will be delighted to sell cull cows and lower merit stock. No problem, they're all making big breasts this year and so on. So listen, thanks a million to you all for coming, and safe farming, and enjoy the good weather.